Thank you for having me this evening. I'm very excited to talk to you about city finances. And I understand that this could be very dry and very boring. And I'm trying not to make it that way. I have a lot of colorful graphs and charts to go over with you all. And we're going to kind of go over just the very tip of the iceberg, very high level summary. And if you do want to know the details, and if you really do want to kind of dive into things, my department does two major reports every year, or every other year. The first is the budget document, the 2-year budget. And so this is kind of lays down the groundwork for us for the next 2 years. There's about 200 pages worth of information in here. And so if you kind of read through things and have questions about things, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to go over those with you. The second report is our annual financial report. It's also known as the CAFR. And what this does is it looks back. It looks back in time going, okay, for this 12-month period, this is what we actually did, right? The budgets kind of look in the future. This is what we want to do. But this audited financial statements is what we actually did. These documents are available online. And then Shauna was kind enough to put the files on a CD. And those are in the back for your review, if you would like. So this is our agenda for tonight. You're going to hang out with me through fund balances, reserves, budgeting, and forecast. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Compton, our city treasurer for the city investments. Marlene Sanders is going to talk about our debt obligations and our unfunded liabilities, all the stuff we want to do, but we really can't. And then I'm going to turn it over to the city manager's office and the chamber to kind of talk about the future. So fund balances, reserves, and equity. So fund balance is just simply the difference between assets and liabilities. So for example, if you have $5,000 in your bank account and about $1,000 on your credit card, your kind of fund balance personally is about $4,000, right? And that's kind of your savings account. That's why a lot of times fund balance are referred to as reserves. So they're kind of interchangeable terminologies there. I had originally was going to use an example of a home, right? Your home is worth $500,000. You have a mortgage of $400,000. So your home equity would be $100,000. I think everybody kind of understands that concept. But the main difference between a home equity and fund balance is you can't really spend your home equity, right? You'd have to sell your home first in order to get that out. So really fund balance is that kind of that money that's kind of available for spending. If any of you folks are familiar with private sector finance, fund balance is similar to retained earnings. It's not the same, but very, very similar. So we call them fund balances because of a fund accounting. That's the accounting system that we use in local government. And simply put, it's just an accounting system to record revenues whose use has been limited by either the donors, it's been limited by grant authority, it's been limited by the governing agency, or other individuals, or mainly by law. So I look at funds in more context of businesses, right? The city's involved in the water business, it's involved in the sewer business, it's involved in the development impact business, right? And each one of these businesses have to have its own set of records, right? It has its own set of assets, its own set of liabilities, its own revenues and its own expenditures, and more importantly, its own fund balances. And another thing to note too is we can't commingle these funds. Water fund can only pay for water services. It can't pay for the services in the fire department. Likewise, the sewer fund can't pay for the services in the police department. So it's kind of my responsibility to make sure each one of these businesses are being accounted for separately. The city has approximately 40 different businesses. And is that a lot? 40 businesses. And is that a lot? And so we have this other standards, right? This Government Accounting Standards Board. It's also called GASB, right? They limit the number of funds as to however many is necessary, but no more than what is necessary. So let's see what the balances are in each one of the city's reserves. So this red line represents the general fund reserves for the past 10 years. You can see that it starts at $10 million in just under $10 million in 2008-09 fiscal year, and increases up to $35 million, just under $35 million in fiscal year 17-18. So significant increases over the last 10 years. And if you look at this chart, between fiscal years 14-15 and 15-16, there's quite a considerable bump. And the reason for that is we did an analysis in fiscal year 2016, and we kind of looked at all of our funds and we go, you know what, there's these 10 funds that really should be reported in the general fund. And if you remember, right, GASB requires us to have no more funds than what is necessary. So we just essentially transfer those funds into the general fund. That's why we kind of see an inflated bump up there. I'm going to go over in detail what that $35 million is made up of, so just kind of hang tight. Our enterprise funds, on the other hand, our enterprise funds tends to be the water, the sewer, and the airport funds. And they're considered enterprise funds because the revenue sources are a little bit different than the general fund. Right? The revenue comes from actual users paying for the service, whereas the general fund typically gets revenues from taxes. So as you can see in this slide, the enterprise fund balances actually have decreased over the last 10 years. And there's a reason for that. But if you just look at it the snapshot in time, you'd be really, really concerned that, oh, shoot, in the next 10 years, it's going to go to zero. And we definitely don't want that. But one of the main reasons why it's been declining is because of the state mandatory water restrictions. Right? The state came down and was like, you need to reduce your water consumption, which in turn translates to less water or less revenue that the water fund is incurring. So that's had a huge impact on the fund balances in the water fund. Additionally, the sewer fund has had huge capital projects that were mainly funded out of those reserves. Right? The wastewater fund recently did a treatment facility and upgraded those. We're kind of in the middle of a recycled water facility as well. And so with the conclusion of these major projects and with consumption kind of starting to trickle itself back up, the fund balance is actually starting to level off a little bit. So we're not in this declining state. It should also be noted too, the wastewater rates. They are going to be examined in the next 2 years. We're currently conducting a master plan that kind of inventories all of our infrastructure in the wastewater side, and then kind of looks at, okay, when do these need to be replaced? How much is it going to cost? And then we kind of make sure that our revenues are going to kind of meet those needs. So lastly, other fund balances are shown in yellow. And these other funds kind of include the gas tax, it includes SB1, it includes the development impact fees, some of our great grant-funded funds. And they tend to be pretty level, right? They're usually used for one-time expenditures. So let's talk a little bit more about that $35 million in general fund expenditures, because even though we have $35 million in general fund balance, it doesn't necessarily mean that we could just spend it on whatever we want. City Council has already kind of assigned some of those dollars for a specific reason. So to start, the council has kind of set a floor. Fund balance really shouldn't dip below 20% of operating general fund expenditures. And this is kind of for in cases of an emergency. The greatest example is in 2003 when we had the San Simeon earthquake, right? Things happen outside of our control that we need to address and to be able to have funding in order to meet those needs. At just under $7 million, the City Council has assigned monies for streets and repair projects. So this is the money that's already been assigned to a street project. We just haven't been able to complete it at June 30th. So their kind of money is already appropriated for a specific reason for these street projects. $4.6 million is dedicated to equipment replacement. So when we replace IT equipment or when we replace vehicles or other large pieces of machinery, what we tend to do is we set money aside each year, each month, and then when the useful life of the equipment is over, then we have enough money cash to pay cash for the project. Marlene's going to go a little bit more detail about some of those reasons why we go into debt, but most of the time we try to pay cash for all of our assets. At the August 7th council meeting, council approved the $4 million payment to pay down our pension liability. In the June, when we kind of adopted the 2-year budget too, we kind of recognized, and again, Marlene will go over this in a little bit more detail, that our facilities are really underfunded, right? We never set up a pot of money for a facility replacement repair. You know, we know that HVACs are going to go out. We know the roof are going to be repaired on all our city facilities. And so we've kind of tried to establish a fund so that we can start setting money aside for those purposes. We have about $1 million of other capital projects outside of roads that are already appropriated for. And that kind of leaves the rest of it, about $7.3 million of what we consider as unassigned. So out of that $35 million, only about 7.3 is unassigned. And so why is it unassigned? Well, there's a lot of different reasons for that. $7.3 million is a lot of money, but it's only 20% of the overall total expenses in the general fund. And if we were to take that $7 million and say put it to streets and roads, that's only going to fund our streets and roads program for maybe a year and a half. So kind of put it in context. Another thing to note too is we don't use that money to pay ongoing operations, right? If we're going to draw down on this $1 million a year, we're going to run out of this money in 7 years. So really we use this kind of pot of money for one-time expenses, something that comes up that we weren't expecting. And really more importantly, when we go into a recessionary period, we could actually use that to kind of soften the blow and not have to reduce city services. Okay, so budget. So we just recently endeavored on a 2-year city budget. And as I mentioned to you already, right, this is a 2-year plan. So this is one that we approved in June. It's going to cover fiscal years 2018-19 and 2019-20. Anyway, and the budget it's a fluid document, right? So as I already mentioned to you, we recently approved a $4 million payment to prepay our pension costs. Well, that's not part of the budget document. So really what happens is the budget document goes out, it's our game plan, but things are constantly changing. We're constantly adding things as we go down the road. The budget is a spending plan, and it's the authority that council gives staff to perform the activities and accomplish the goals that they set for us. But it should also be noted too that the city has fiscal policies that kind of limit to what it is that staff can and cannot do. So for example, we have a $1.6 million project to repave Union Road over by Barney Sports Park. Well, just because it's in the budget doesn't necessarily mean we could go out there and get a contractor to go do it. We have to get council's approval in order to get that contract approved. So even though it's in the budget, city council still has their eyes on it as it comes to light and as we're approving different contracts. The budget contains estimated revenues, and it also includes position listings. So it has a list of all the employees that are authorized in the next 2-year period. It says where they're going to be budgeted in what department. It's going to say how they're going to be funded in that document. Lastly, it also contains a list of capital projects, not just for the 2-year period of what we're going to actually accomplish in the next 2 years, but that gives you a preview of actually what's on the 5-year horizon. Right? Capital projects tend to be a little bit larger in nature, so we kind of actually need to take a longer view approach on those projects. But council is only approving the budget for the first 2 years of the period. So obviously the capital projects will change. So the budget includes general fund expenditures of $45.9 million in the water fund, again, only for water services at 21.6, sewer fund at 12.2, and in total, when you add up all the funds all together, all 40 funds, it's right around $113.4 million. Before I kind of dive into where that money is being spent, I kind of want to talk about the revenues first. So the general fund revenues are funded mainly by sales tax, property tax, and transient occupancy tax, also known as hotel tax. Those 3 sources comprise of 75% of the city's general fund revenue. These three revenue sources really can determine the health of a city. I like to call them the 3 pillars of a financially stable city. If a city is stable in these 3 areas, they tend to be financially stable, generally speaking. For example, the city of San Luis Obispo has all 3 of these, right? With good sales tax in Costco and good sales tax with Home Depot, right? Their property taxes, their median home income or household prices tend to be the highest in the county. And in tourism, right? They have a good tourism base. Similar with Pismo Beach. Pismo Beach has the outlets, right? So they have a lot of sales tax coming from those outlet malls. Obviously, the beachfront properties have huge assessed values on the properties there. And they are a travel destination, so they are solid in TOT. Grover Beach, on the other hand, they don't have a lot of hotels. They don't really have a good sales tax base or retail businesses. And even though they're a beach community, they still tend to lag behind what Pismo Beach's properties are. Now, one thing that Grover Beach does have is marijuana. And I'm not here to talk about marijuana tonight, but I'm just saying that it wouldn't surprise me if marijuana starts creeping up on this board as kind of that 4th pillar for city financial stability. So let's dive into the 3 major sources. Sales tax. So currently the sales tax in our city is 7.75%. That means for every $100 that you spend, you're going to be paying an additional $7.75 in taxes. But not everything you spend is sales taxable, right? Groceries aren't taxable. Services aren't taxable. So I don't know if you ever look at your maintenance when you get your car serviced. And when you get your oil changed, the oil and the oil filter are taxable. But the guy you pay to actually change the oil, that's not taxable. So when you actually do have $100 worth of sales tax, $6 of that $7.75 going straight to the state. 77% of the sales tax that you pay goes directly to the state. The city, we get $1.50, and the county gets a little chunk of it, about a quarter. So what does the $1.50 translate into our revenue stream? This chart up here shows the actual dollar piece of sales tax history for the last 10 years. And as you can see, it started at just about $5 million in 8-9, and it's actually increased significantly over the last 3 years to just over 10 million. And why have we seen significant increases over the last 3 years? The biggest piece of that is because of auto dealerships. I think we've seen kind of a pent-up demand for cars. During the recessionary periods, 2008 to 2012 or so, people weren't buying cars, right? They were still scared. They were still kind of concerned about the economy and where things were going. Well, now that we kind of got ourselves out of the recessionary period, I think there was just like built-up, pent-up need for vehicles. But obviously, we're not buying cars every year. At least I'm not buying a car every year. And thanks for laughing, Marlene. That was nice. Anyway, so we're seeing the trends that auto sales are actually going to start declining, which is fine because we're seeing growth in other sales tax industries. So it's going to kind of balance things out. So we're actually going to anticipate sales tax kind of leveling off for the time being. So that's $1 of the 150. In 2012, the voters approved the supplemental sales tax measure. So over the past 6 years, the city has collected about $23.7 million in additional tax revenue. And even though it's a general tax and can be used for general purposes, the city council has dedicated that to streets and roads. $19.5 million has been spent on streets and roads since the implementation of the supplemental sales tax. And then we also have an additional $9 million that's already in the queue that hasn't been spent quite yet. Property taxes. So similar to this sales tax, the money you pay in property taxes doesn't all come to the city. In fact, we're third on the list. For every dollar you pay in property taxes, almost 40 cents goes to the school district, 27 cents goes to the county, and then we get about 19 cents out of every dollar that you pay in property taxes. The remaining kind of goes to the state, community colleges, cemetery districts, some other little government agencies. But to kind of help you put in perspective, say you bought a house for $452,700, and that happens to be the median home price in Paso Robles in 2017. That's where I kind of got that number from. Our property tax rate is 1%. So in other words, you'd be paying $377 a month in property taxes. But rather than send the county a check twice a year, we're going to kind of have you write checks to every single agency that's going to benefit from this property tax. That would mean the school district gets $146 a month, the county gets $100 a month, and our city gets $70 a month. So that's $70 a month to run your police department, your fire department, to run all the recreation and park maintenance. Everybody else fights over the last $61. Another thing I wanted to point out with property taxes is property tax doesn't increase with the same rate as your home value. So if your home value increases by 5% in a given year, we're limited to how much of an increase we can on your property taxes due to Prop 13. Because of Prop Resistance 13, there's a CPI increase of only 2%. So even if your house increases to 10%, we can still only raise your property taxes to by 2%. However, whenever you sell your home or you move into a different home, it kind of resets that ticker, that starting mark, and we kind of start from square one again. So if everybody could just move every 5 years, that would be very helpful. In 2017-18, the total property tax revenue the city received was about $10.5 million. Transient occupancy tax, hotel tax. This is a tax that the city does not have to share. So this one's all of ours. So currently the hotel tax is at 10% for all hotel stays in the city. And as you can see from this graph, in 2008 and 9, the city received just under $3 million in taxes. And this past year, we almost reached $6 million. In fiscal year 18-19, we're hoping to actually exceed that $6 million mark. But significant growth over the last 3 years, some of which is attributed to getting short-term vacation rentals on board and paying their fair share of property taxes. The orange line shows the number of hotel rooms, vacation rental rooms, RV spaces in the city, and it's growing very, very quickly. We're currently at about 2,200, and we have over 1,000 rooms in the hotel queue already. Another thing to note on the slide is that even during the recessionary periods from 2008 to about 12-13, we never saw a decline in TOT revenues, which is actually quite remarkable. So all of our 3 major revenue sources are looking really, really good. Sales, like as I said, sales tax is expected to flatten, but we kind of endured overinflated increases for the last 3 years. Property values continue to grow. And again, TOT has significant growth year over year. Again, all indicators of a financially healthy city. Now we'll talk a little bit about expenditures. So because the city serves the public, right, a majority of our general fund expenditures go straight to personnel costs. Right? In the upcoming year, it's anticipated that roughly 58% of these costs will go to pay people that serve you, right? It's the officers that serve you, it's the firefighters that serve you. Again, all the core city functions are paid out of the general fund. 27% is for operating costs to kind of support staff to meet the goals of city council. And roughly 14% goes to capital projects. Majority of that is the supplemental sales tax kind of passing through straight to streets and roads. So who's spending the money? 28% goes to your police department, 17% goes to the fire department. That's almost half of general fund dollars going towards public safety. 20% goes to community services, which includes recreation, library, kind of park maintenance. And then roughly 30% being shared between all the community development, my department, and city manager's office. The reason why Public Works piece of that pie is so little is because most of their operations are in the water and sewer fund. This is only reporting the general fund. So one of the questions that we get asked a lot is, why are our city employees the highest paid in the county? And kind of the main reason why that is because we expect more out of our employees than neighboring cities. So what this graph is trying to represent is the number of employees that the city has per 1,000 people. But as I mentioned to you, but I should also note that not all cities are created equal. Atascadero, for example, they don't have a water department. They outsource that to Atascadero Water Mutual Company. Grover Beach and Aurora Grande, they don't have fire services. They outsource that to Five Cities Fire Authority. So it's kind of, you have to take that in context. It's not just an apples to apples comparison from city to city. Probably our closest comparator is the city of San Luis Obispo. It's not identical, but it's close. And as you can see from this chart, San Luis Obispo has over 8 employees per 1,000 in the population, whereas the city of Paso Robles has just over 6. So this chart is just kind of help you understand our staffing levels when compared to other cities and how our city does just as much, if not more, than our neighboring. Okay. So forecasting. So forecasting is different than a budget, right? The budget is a spending plan. This is what we're actually going to do. What forecasting is more of an analysis of current conditions kind of projected out for 10 years. History is the best tool to project the future, but we're kind of living in kind of a weird time because we're 10 years of economic growth year after year. And we know that's not sustainable, so we have to kind of keep this recession in the back of our minds whenever we incur expanded services. We never know when the next recession is going to hit, and I don't care who you know or what economists you heard. We don't know. We don't know when it's going to happen. We don't know how long it's going to last, and we don't know how big of an impact it's going to have. Another thing I want to mention too, when we do these forecasting models, we don't include development that's not already under construction. This kind of helps the city make sure it doesn't run before it ties its shoes. I like this example, and I'll give props to my wife for giving it to me. Say I want to buy a house, but I can't afford that house today. But I know in 3 years, I'm going to get that promotion at work that they promised me. And in 3 years, I'll be able to afford that house. So I'm just going to go ahead and buy it now. Obviously, that sounds like a horrible idea, right? Because what happens in 3 years? The car's going to break down. The kids are going to get, break their arms. Or, hey, what if I don't get that promotion that they promised me? So similarly, right, we get developers coming in saying, we want to build a 200-room hotel, or we want to develop this big piece of property. And that's great. We love it. We embrace the growth, but we don't put any of those numbers in our financial model until they actually break ground and we know that they're actually going to do the construction that they're going to say. Again, this kind of allows the city to live within its means. So what does our general forecast look like? Well, so to kind of start, we kind of take our current operations and we don't project on the future, again, any potential service level decrease. We're kind of saying, okay, we are what we are now, and we're going to continue that in the near future. City Council recently approved additional 6 firefighters to kind of help meet current demand. Another plug for Paso Talks too. If you missed the talk on public safety, it'll kind of put into context why it was so important to get these 6 firefighters on board. So we added that to the model. In fact, before we presented this to council, we actually kind of did this exact same thing at the staff level. So that we wanted to make sure, again, we could afford the 6 firefighters. We weren't running before we tied our shoes. As I mentioned to you already, we want to start funding our facility repair and replacement fund. So we kind of added that to the model, right? We're going to kind of slowly kind of creep up to where we get fully funded on our replacements. We also had the Boys School on our radar and taking over that property and maintaining that piece of property for the benefit of the city. So we kind of take all of our expected service levels and we kind of overlay them with our revenues. And as you can see, for the next 4 years, our revenues are just barely exceeding expenses. Not a whole lot of wiggle room there. And then it's not really until about year 7 or 8 until we actually start seeing those kind of separate. However, I kind of mentioned already that, okay, well, what happens if a recession hits? Because it's always in the back of our mind. And so we kind of put that on the model. Say the recession hits in 2021, and really it makes our revenues go flat for 4 years. As you can see now, our expenditures are exceeding our revenues, which is not a good sign. But like I said earlier, that's why we have good fund balance and good reserves, to kind of lessen that impacts of when that happens. Now, obviously, if this is really what was going to happen, we'd have to do something, because going expenditures exceeding revenues for 8 years is just not an option. And so we'd have to address somehow reducing those expenditures. Staff is constantly updating this model, right? As I said, we don't include development until they're under construction. But man, as soon as construction hits, and as soon as we know kind of what an estimated amount of revenue that's going to generate, that red line bumps up. And we kind of read and analyze everything on what it is that we want to do. Unfortunately, this is my last slide, and I have to end on retirement costs because it's been a hot topic lately. But there's actually there is a little bit of good here. So this graph represents the retirement costs for the last 7 years and for the upcoming 7 years. In 11-12, you'll see that retirement costs are about $3.5 million. Goes to about $4 million in this fiscal year that we're in now, and jumps up over $6 million by 24-25. Significant increases are anticipated in the next 3 years. And this is kind of the big issue that everybody's talking about. Everybody that's a part of a PERS agency is in the same boat. Most other cities kind of have the same slope of the graph, just different millions of dollars on the left-hand side. But one of the things that City Council did this last budget cycle is, you know what, let's not wait till 21-22. You know, if that's going to be what the costs are then, let's make the cost now. So what we actually ended up doing is we're prepaying some of our pension expenses. And we've actually increased our pension costs to kind of where they're going to be at in 6 years. So we're not as worried about being able to meet those needs because, you know what, we're meeting those needs now. The prepaid pension can kind of go into 2 different places. You can either go straight to PERS, or we kind of have this fancy savings account called a 115 trust, and I think Mike and Marlene are both going to talk about those here in a little bit too. But the Section 115 is still in the city's control, so it's just a savings account kind of outside of the general fund where the city could use to pay down future pension obligations. So thanks for listening to me. I'm going to turn it over to Mike now and look forward to your questions after the presentation.
Good evening, everybody. My name again is Mike Compton. I'm the elected city treasurer. As of June 30th of this year, the city's investment portfolio was nearly $80 million. And you may be thinking, what makes him qualified to manage $80 million? First off, I've been a municipal CFO for nearly 33 years, the last 20 in the city of Paso Robles. I retired in 2007, but I also have nearly 40 years as a appointed or elected city treasurer. I am currently the elected city treasurer in Paso, and I have been since 1988. I'm in the process of renewing my certification as a certified California municipal treasurer, and I also attend a number of continuing education events. Treasurer functions, cash flow management, investing city funds, investment reporting, and debt management. Real quick, cash flow management. I log into the city's network 4 to 5 times a week to check the cash balances. I'm the one responsible for making sure they have cash to make payroll, cash to pay accounts payables, and if there happens to be monies that aren't needed immediately, I will turn right around and invest those on a weekly basis. Investment reporting, I'm going to skip investing city funds for the moment. Investment reporting, I prepare even though it's not required by the state of California, I prepare a monthly investment report, and you can find those on the city's website. They're posted each month, approximately the 15th or 20th of the following month for the prior month, and they're all right there. Debt management, I work with Ryan and Marlene on debt management, but I do want to focus on one thing. Back in 1998, the city electorate approved $38 million in general obligation bonds. The tax rate was first set in 2002 at 0.1775 cents per $100 of valuation, assessed valuation. What that means is in 2003, it was costing every resident $177.50 per $100,000 of home valuation or business valuation. I have been able to present opportunities to the City Council to lower that tax rate, I think every year but one since 2003. The tax rate for 2019, the current fiscal year, is 0.049, a decrease from 0.1775. That means that for every $100,000 of assessed valuation, the taxes is only $49.10. Investment program goals, the top of the list is safety, preservation of principal. I am limited by two things. There's a government code section which restricts what public agencies can invest in. I can't do the things that Edward Jones can do for you, or those types of broker dealers. I'm also limited by the city's investment policy. The City Council has adopted an investment policy which actually is more restrictive than state code. So we can make sure that nothing happens to to the city's invested funds. Liquidity, that is the second goal. The city needs to have money available when it's needed. So we pay payroll bi-weekly. So I need to have approximately $700,000 every 2 weeks. Accounts payable, it can vary. It can be as low as 300, 400,000, or it can be as high as $1 million, $1.5 million every week. And so I need to make sure that we have sufficient liquidity to make those expenses. Yield. By way of example, and I'll talk about it more, but we have this section, as Ryan alluded to, we have a Section 115 trust for our PERS unfunded liabilities. Those monies are managed by an outside investment firm, and they can invest in virtually anything. Think of them as an Edward Jones. And they made 9.26% for the year ended June 30 on about $3.2 million. Whereas my yield on the monies that I can invest in, because of the restrictions, I can only make about 230. Okay? But I try to keep the city as close to 100% invested as possible. The third thing that I'm responsible for is maintaining compliance with the city's investment policy, so that I don't buy, or my investment advisory company doesn't buy anything that is not allowed by the investment policy. The investment policy structure is made up of 3 parts. I would say the most important part is our liquidity fund. That is the monies that I have available to meet the payroll and accounts payable and those sorts of things. Liquidity pool, by my definition, is less than 3 months. So the maximum maturity is less than 3 months. 90% of that money is virtually overnight money. I can make a phone call before 10 a.m. in the morning and have the money either in the city's checking account, or vice versa. I can make a phone call before 10 o'clock in the morning and invest that money in this liquidity pool. Then we have our short-term pool, which earns a bit more interest. It's by definition the maturities are greater than 3 months or less than 1 year. And then the long-term pool, which goes out to a limit of 5 years. That's as far as a public agency can go out. And it's investments that are over 1 year, and we had about $70 million in it. Again, our total portfolios at June 30th was nearly $80 million. Additionally, on the investment fund, we had other funds that were being invested. Ryan and I both have alluded to the Section 115 trust. The council had the foresight to start paying down our unfunded retirement obligation. And we have about $3.2 million as of June 30, and we expect to put somewhere between $2 and $4 million in that Section 115 trust. We will put aside $4 million. The question is how much do we put in the 115 trust and how much do we give to CalPERS? We have this other post-employment benefit trust. We started funding this way back in, late 80s, early 90s. This is to cover mainly health insurance costs for retired employees. And the city is, depending on your perspective, is very fortunate that we do not keep retired employees on the city's health insurance, but we make a monthly contribution of $500 and it's fixed. And they have to work here so many years and retire before they can receive that benefit. And it has about $7.4 million. So it's fully funded, 100%. And then we have our bond reserves. These are, we've issued bonds other than general obligation bonds, sewer bonds, water bonds, redevelopment bonds, which require reserve funds, and they are managed outside the purview of the city staff. And with that, I'm finished. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming tonight. Marlene Sanders, Administrative Services Director. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit tonight about the city's long-term debt obligations. So why does the city have long-term debt? Well, certainly the city builds things. We have a lot of capital improvements, and we buy things. We have capital purchases. And these are things that are generally expensive and have a long useful life. And generally, they're projects and purchases that cannot be paid from our current revenue. So they're financed. Similar to those of us as individuals who might go to purchase a home, and we can't afford to pay that out of our savings account, so we'll take out a mortgage and we'll make payments on our home. Or we purchase an auto and we take out a loan to make payments against that automobile purchase. Here's some examples of capital improvements that the city has financed: our beautiful safety center, Barney Schwartz Park, our senior center. Some of our capital purchases that have been financed over the years are big equipment like fire engines, police vehicles, and certainly some of our large vehicles that we use in our enterprise or utility departments. So let's take a look at our debt ratios for our three major funds. So our general fund has about 2% of its expected annual revenue that will be used for debt obligations. Our water fund, about 25% of its expected annual revenues are for its debt obligations annually. And then the sewer fund, about 28% of its expected annual revenue are for debt obligations. And these debt levels are appropriate for each fund. Our water and sewer are higher because they require significant infrastructure to deliver the essential services to our community. There are also a few areas in which the city has underfunded liabilities. And first, I'll talk a little bit about infrastructure. So along with our streets and roads and bridges, the city has several major facilities that it must take care of. It's not had an opportunity to establish a sufficient reserve fund for maintaining, repairing, or replacing these facilities. Based on projected repair and replacement estimates, the general fund should be setting aside approximately $3 million annually for expected costs over the next 30 years. So how are we addressing these infrastructure underfunded liabilities? Well, certainly the voter-approved half-cent sales tax has been very important in assisting with our road repair projects, providing an additional $4.75 million annually. However, we still have work to do on our roads, and we don't have all of the necessary revenue to make all of the necessary improvements in our roads. So still work to be done there. We also established a facility depreciation fund in our most recently adopted two-year budget and set aside $3 million for our expected costs over the next 30 years. However, we obviously still have more work to do. Ryan mentioned in his slide that we are going to be setting aside a small amount, less than $1 million, each following year to try and continue and fund that facility depreciation account. But again, we'll have more work to do in properly funding that for the upcoming needed repairs and eventual replacement of our facilities. The city also has underfunded liability with regard to employee pensions, and several factors have contributed to the pension costs and the rising pension costs. Let's take a quick look at how pensions are funded to help us understand the rising costs. So the funding of pensions is really a shared responsibility. And for every dollar that we pay in retirement benefits, 61% of that comes from CalPERS investment earnings. 26% comes from the employer contributions or the city's contributions, and 13% comes from employee contributions. So you can see that those investment earnings are really important for the funding of the overall pension program. So let's take a look at the historical investment earnings for CalPERS. So as you can see here during the Great Recession, CalPERS lost a great deal of money. They rebounded a bit, came back down, rebounded, back down. If you look along the bottom here, you'll see that on average, the 5-year average return was 8.8%, 10-year 4.4%, 20-year was 6.6%, and 30-year 8.4% on average, the return. So it makes sense that here CalPERS has made a decision to reduce their discount rate, which is also their investment rate. It's what they expect to earn on their investments, from 7.5% to 7%, and they're phasing that in over 3 years. So that's adding to our rising costs. Certainly investment performance will continue to be important for all of us moving forward. CalPERS has also adopted new actuarial assumptions. They look at retirement rates, hiring and termination rates, mortality rates, rates of salary increases, and these new actuarial assumptions that they've adopted have added to the rising costs. During the recession, many agencies were reducing staff, freezing wages, or even decreasing wages at certain agencies, and this had an impact on the amount that people were paying into the system, again driving up some of the future costs. CalPERS has also shortened its amortization period, and this is the period over which the actuarial gains and losses are amortized. So if there were losses, they used to amortize those losses for us over 30 years. They're now amortizing it over 20 years, so each year that cost is much greater. I believe Ryan mentioned earlier, but I'll reiterate it because I believe it's important, that our employees did not create this CalPERS pension crisis, nor did management or council here at the city. Quite the contrary, they've been working very hard and working collaboratively to try and address the problem. So how are we addressing? In 2012, all of our employee groups worked cooperatively with the city, and they agreed to lower the retirement benefit for new hires, which is reducing the future costs. We also had pension reform in 2013, which established statewide uniformity in retirement benefits for new hires and also reduced our future costs. Employees are also paying more toward their retirement costs. Employee groups, again, have worked very cooperatively with the city, and they are now not only paying 100% of their employee contribution, but they're also paying a portion of the city's contribution. So we've engaged in cost share agreements with them. And our city is really leading the way in cost sharing in our local area. So no other city has reached these agreements with their employee groups. As both Mike and Ryan also mentioned, we established our 115 Trust, and in fiscal year 16-17, the council approved a $5 million special payment. And it was split, 50% of it went directly to CalPERS to pay down our unfunded accrued liability, and 50% went into our 115 Trust. And as they mentioned, that 115 Trust is really like a reserve fund. So we have control over that money, even though it's set aside specifically for retirement contributions. But in the future, should we have a need through an economic downturn, and perhaps we're having a difficult time making our annual contribution payments, we can actually utilize the funds that we've set aside in the trust to meet our annual contributions to CalPERS. Again, in fiscal year 17-18, the council approved $0.8 million special payment that went to our 115 Trust. And then this year in 1819, council has approved another $4 million special payment. That payment will be made here in the next month or so, and it's going to be split. 50% will go to CalPERS directly, and 50% will go into our 115 trust. And lastly, there on the slide, the city and labor groups have also worked together and agreed on working together cooperatively for fair and reasonable changes to the pension system to ensure its long-term stability. These agreements that were made, or the agreement that were made with each of the groups between the city and those groups, have been memorialized in each of the labor group agreements. And so while we have implemented significant cost reductions, additional changes are still needed at the state level. We can't make enough changes here at our local level to solve the rising pension costs on our own. So the employee groups in the city need to continue working together with state level member organizations on this issue, making sure that it remains a priority so that we can ensure the program's long-term stability.
Thank you, Marlene. So I was sitting listening to those three presentations just as you were, and I had several reactions, and I wanted to see if maybe you had the same reactions. First, obviously all three of those people are very committed professionals. They take their jobs very seriously, they're very skilled, and they know what they're doing, and that's certainly reassuring to me, and I hope reassuring to all of us. Second, numbers are very difficult to try to get your head around. I mean, $100 million, $79 million, those sound like huge numbers, and they are large numbers. I wouldn't want to take that away. But when you put it in perspective, it starts to mean something different. So for instance, Mike said at a given point in time, in a snapshot in time, we had $79 million invested in the various vehicles. Well, when you put that together with what Ryan said, we can't touch a lot of that. Some of it's already committed, some of it's already assigned. And so there's probably, on that given day, and Mike would have to do the numbers, there was probably $40 million or so that was really available to the city in a crunch. Well, that's less, I mean, that's about 40% of our annual budget. Our annual budget in all funds is about $100 million. But we absolutely know, no matter what happens, no matter what earthquake, what natural disaster, what economic disaster, we cannot stop providing services. We have to put police on the street. We have to put fire on the street. We have to make sure that the city facilities are open. We have to make sure water gets to your tap every day. Well, to me, 40%, a 40% contingency, a 40% available isn't enough. It's just not enough. What's happening in the economy overall in the United States right now is there are some, as we know, there are some people who are doing really, really well. And the rest of us, you know, we're able to put food on the table, we're able to do the things we like to do, but we're struggling. We're all facing more constraints than we used to face. We all are less able to be confident about the future than we were able to be before. And that's absolutely the same case with cities. There are cities in the state of California that are doing incredibly well. Palm Desert, actually a smaller city, I believe, than us, has reserves probably 3-4 times ours. But the majority of cities are struggling. We're able to provide the services you're asking us to provide, but we're staying up at night trying to figure out how to ensure we can continue to do that. And so, yes, $100 million is a lot of money, but in terms of the scale of this city, I don't think it's enough. It doesn't make me feel comfortable that no matter what happens in the future, we will be able to continue to provide the services. So that's why we're working so hard, and that's why we have 3 very skilled professionals managing the funds. And there's an irony there, because it's your money, all of ours who pay taxes, but they treat it like it was their personal money, not in the sense that they are exorbitant or spend it on something else, but they don't want to lose a penny. They are very careful to make sure every investment we make is a sound investment, and that every dollar we spend is a sound expenditure. I sign every single check well, I don't sign the checks, but the invoice for the checks, I sign every single one over $5,000. When I sign it, there are already 3 signatures on it. So there's at least 4 of us looking before it even gets to the Administrative Services Department to make sure the invoice is correct, to make sure that it was worth what we received in services, and to make sure it's worthy of you that are paying the taxes. So one of the reactions I had was, I hope you feel and understand how seriously we take the trust you put in us to spend your money correctly. I hope you, as I did, got the message that, as Ryan said, we're doing well, but we also have some very serious challenges. And I hope you also got the sense that we don't do this every day. We don't do public speaking every day. So Ryan misspoke, just an accident, but he's nervous. For instance, he said we're the highest paid city employees in the county. We're not. That was just a mistake. Yes, we are well paid, and that's up to the community and the council, but we absolutely believe we give top-notch service. So for example, the slide Ryan showed that compared our costs per population compared to San Luis Obispo, and the San Luis Obispo numbers included all the students, many of whom live on campus. If you look at just the full-time resident population of the 2 cities, we're about the same, and we have half the employees that San Luis Obispo has. We are also a full-service city, like a lot of cities in the county are not. We're the only city with an airport. We're the only city with our own library. The county provides the libraries for all the other cities in the county. Would the county pay us any money to do that? No. If we said we're not going to provide library services anymore, would the county take it over? No. This is a full-service city. Okay, so did I just mess that up? Ryan, if you'd help me. Yeah, I think the laptop went to sleep over a boring speech right here. So. But I just wanted to provide that context before we start talking about the future. How does the future look? As Ryan said, yes, we believe based on the forecast that our revenues will be slightly greater than expenses. One of the things that is absolutely true of cities, we don't control our revenues. We have control over our expenditures, we don't control our revenues. Neither staff nor the city council can change any tax that we collect, whether it's business license tax, property tax, sales tax, or transient occupancy tax. We can't adjust that. Only the voters can adjust that. So our revenues are relatively easy to project, assuming there's no recession, but we can't really control it. So we can't raise that line when the 2 lines get too close together. And let me get my notes to make sure I can continue until the computer comes back on. And that's another message that I hope you also were able to discern, is that there's a lot of structure in city finances. Most of that structure isn't imposed, isn't developed, isn't as a result of us. It's a result of GASB, as Ryan mentioned. It's a result of state legislation. It's a result of prior voter measures like Prop 1, Prop 13, Prop 218. They all regulate what we can do and limit our flexibility. There are other challenges we're facing. Internet sales tax, even though there was a Supreme Court decision recently that will start allowing sales tax paid to internet firms like Amazon to come to cities, the state in its wisdom has decided that's going to go to a pool. So even if it's one of us who makes that purchase on the internet, the sales tax won't necessarily come to us. So that's money that would have gone to one of our local retail establishments that's now going to Amazon, and the sales tax won't necessarily come to us. I don't want to appear like I'm whining, but I just want people to understand some of the constraints we face. So how do we fix the constraints we face? Well, some of them are, as I mentioned, at the state and national level. We can't fix those individually, but we're working very hard with the League of California Cities, with the National League of Cities and others to try to impact those. One of the easiest ones to talk about is CalPERS. CalPERS was originally created as an investment pool. The whole intent was so that a city didn't invest all its funds itself and risk a bad investment that would have a major impact on the city, that CalPERS would be a pool that would distribute that risk amongst all the cities. Well, CalPERS, over time, and that was a result of the CalPERS board and the state legislature, changed from just being an investment pool to say, cities, we're going to handle everything. You don't have anything to worry about. We're going to tell you what retirement benefits you make to your employees. We're going to tell you how you make those payments. We're going to tell you who you can hire and who you can't hire. And oh, by the way, don't think about ever leaving CalPERS, because we're going to put in a poison pill so significant that you can't leave. So right now our unfunded liability with CalPERS is about $37 million. It's actually less than that, but that's what CalPERS says. And it's less than that because thanks to Mike and Ryan and the council, we have put money into the Section 115 trust. But that's the number that CalPERS publishes. And CalPERS also tells us how much it would cost us to get out of CalPERS, and it's about twice that amount. Well, no city can do that. No city can pay that much to get out of CalPERS and be paying into a replacement retirement fund for its employees. So CalPERS is one of those wonderful state agencies that says, we're from the state and we're here to help you. Okay, but there are things we can do at the state level, and we are working on those. But the majority of things we can control are at the local level. So how do we fix the problems we're in? How do we ensure the future financial stability of the city at the local level? The first thing we have to do always, and it's the first thing we always look at, is how do we cut costs? So when we have a vacancy, we've got about 180, 190 employees. At any given time, about 20 positions are vacant. First thing we do when we have a vacancy is look, do we really need to refill this vacancy? Or is there another thing we should be looking at? Now, when it comes to police and fire, it's a pretty easy answer, because we know if we don't fill that position, we're going to be paying overtime to somebody already in the service. But we have a lot of other positions that clearly are discretionary. The result of long-standing services the city's offered, the result of decisions by the city council, but still, those are discretionary positions. So we can always look at how can we cut costs. Second thing we can do, and there's a list of 4 that I'm going to give you. The second thing we can do is fight for every revenue that's due us. So we need to object to the state putting internet sales tax in the pool and make sure it comes back to us if it's our residents who've spent that money. We need to ensure that we're getting our fair share of property tax. And one of the features of this county is we get a significantly lower percentage of property tax than is the average throughout the state. So Ryan said approximately 18 to 19% of your property tax dollars, all of our property tax dollars, come to the city. For most cities in the state, it's 24, 25%. That is a huge difference. That's a huge difference. So we need to fight for those revenues that are rightfully ours. And our mayor and our council have been the leaders in going to the Board of Supervisors and saying, we need to have a serious discussion. We've also been the lead city going to the county saying, if we're going to annex land, and we are looking at a potential annexation down by 46 West, why do you get to keep all the revenues that come from that land? Why do you get to keep all the tax revenues when we're going to be providing the services? So the county, for instance, built a lot of homes, or allowed to be built a lot of homes along Jardine Road, east of Jardine Road. Well, whose services do they really utilize? They utilize the city's services, yet all the revenues, property tax and others, go to the county. So we need to fight for all the revenues that are rightfully ours. The third thing we need to do is economic vitality. And Gina's going to come up in just a second and share what the city and the chamber are doing cooperatively. But I want to put that into context a little bit. I'm not talking economic growth. It's the general plan based on the votes of the voters that decides whether we're going to get bigger as a city or not. But I'm talking economic vitality. How do we ensure that people in the city, our current residents, our current students, have not only good jobs, but career opportunities, and jobs and careers that can allow them to live in the kind of house they want to live and enjoy the lifestyle they want to live. We can't do it if we're just selling goods and providing service to each other. We have to be bringing in money from the outside. Tourism has its pluses and minuses, but one of the things it does is it brings in income from the outside. We have no economic vitality. We cannot grow economically if we're not bringing in more money from the outside. And that's what the Chamber is working so hard to do right now, is to ensure our local businesses are successful and we have new businesses starting up.
Good evening. My name is Gina Fitzpatrick. I'm the president and CEO of the Paso Robles Chamber of Commerce, and we're the voice of business for you, our residents here in the community. Primarily, I do want to say thank you to our mayor and council members for deeming the Chamber of Commerce the lead agency for economic development, because it's given us that opportunity to really take things to the next level, to really do as Tom had suggested and look at the opportunities that we have to strengthen the head of household jobs that we have in our community and what we're offering business owners and residents as far as a place to live, work, and shop. I really don't have too much to say tonight, except for that I'd like to introduce Josh Cross. He's going to come up, and he's actually going to be the one that shares with you specifically what we are working on in all these areas. We've done great work towards developing a strategic plan and adding on to what the city created back in 2006. And so Josh is actually going to elaborate on all of that for you tonight. But I'm going to stay for questions and help in any way that I can if you have suggestions that we can do and take forward. So come on up, Josh.
Thanks, Gina. Yeah, Tom, we've got a big job to do at the Chamber, don't we? That's big shoes to fill. I'd like everyone to raise your hand if you're a resident, an employee, or a business owner. Okay, good, I'm in the right spot. Okay, so for economic development, we are really charged with 4 primary areas, and that is to foster an environment in which startup companies can establish themselves and grow, to retain our existing businesses and streamline expansion efforts so that businesses can flourish, and to attract existing companies and jobs to relocate here or to open an additional location or a portion of their business here. So how do we do that? The Chamber has been working on some programs and initiatives that I'd like to share with you. The first initiative we call Shaping Our Future. It's a year-long initiative that we've been undertaking since February, and the idea is to engage the public through various exercises with the end result being a strategic plan. So we started early in the year with a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we learned information that's kind of, not a no-brainer. We learned that housing costs are very expensive. There's head of household jobs. We need more of those. So we got that kind of feedback, but we also got feedback like one of our threats was, as our city continues to grow, we don't want to lose our small town charm and character. So how do we find that balance? In October 23rd and 24th, we're having an economic development open house at the Chamber. The community is welcome to come and explore the Chamber and learn about our different economic development programs. We'll have workforce development representatives there, other economic development professionals, as well as city staff. At that same time, we're going to be rolling out a business and citizen survey to gauge your perception of how the economy is for you personally. How is your business? How do you interact with businesses and such? And then on November 8th, we have what we're calling a business walk. And we have an ambitious goal of visiting 400 businesses in 1 hour. So the idea is we're going to engage 80 to 90 volunteers. Volunteers are going to break into small groups, and they're going to visit 10 businesses each in an hour. They're going to ask business owners or managers 3 key questions. How's your business doing? What issues are you facing? And what can the city or chamber do to help you overcome those challenges? We'll get all that information back. and then we'll still distill all the information, and the end result will be a strategic plan update, which will help guide the chamber and the city's economic developments. But the goal of this initiative is to ensure that the city or the community is engaged in developing these strategies that will guide the chamber and the city's economic development for years to come. Next, we have our BEST program, and Marlene and Ryan got me thinking about pie because of all the pie charts. So the BEST is called the Business and Entrepreneurial Success Team. And the idea behind that is if you owned a pie company and you were really good at making pies, your friends told you were good, your mom told you were good, everyone's telling you you're great at pies, so you decided to go into business. But maybe you don't know as much about tax and law and architecture. So the Chamber's put together the BEST team, which will be a customized team that can help you address some of those problems. So right now, if you go onto the Chamber's website, there's an application for you to fill out, and you can select different professions to have representatives from those professions come and assist you. So we have folks from accounting, airport development, architecture, engineering, finance, Hispanic services, law, marketing, real estate, restaurant, retail, education, and tourism. A tremendous amount of professionals just really eager to engage and help the community. So once again, that's the BEST program. And the goal is to create a one-stop shop for new business owners who are, frankly confused or overwhelmed about, starting their business, the business side of business. Next, we have the Economic Development Microsite. The microsite is forthcoming. We're going to launch it next month, and it's going to be a website within our chamber website. It basically includes the tools that you would need to start, retain, expand, or for us to attract businesses. It's going to include some really great tools like business quick start guides. We worked with the city staff to put together about a dozen quick start guides which will help folks navigate the city permitting processes for the 12 most popular businesses that start. So that's a great tool. We're going to have a new business startup guide. It's a comprehensive soup to nuts packet of information that talks to you about how to create a business plan, how to set up your company, and such. We're going to have workforce development solutions. It's going to describe apprenticeship program opportunities. We have a number of development opportunity sites. So if a developer was to come to our website, they could see all the vacant and available land for development. And so once again, the website content is being finalized and will go live in about a month. So the goal is for the website is that when you're thinking about your pie business in the middle of the night and inspiration strikes, you can go to our website and you're going to have all the tools you need to scratch that itch of inspiration. You're going to know where to put your business, maybe how much the rent is going to be, how to get your employee and grow your workforce, how to start your business, your business guide. So that's essentially what it's intended to do. And as a final thought, as residents, business owners, and employees, the Chamber of Commerce really wants to know that we're here to help you with the resources you need to thrive. You can stop by the Chamber, you can give me a call, you can check out our current website, you can take me out to pie, and we're really ramping up this tool to be as helpful to the public as possible and the business community. With that, I'd like to invite Tom back up. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. So we've talked about cutting costs, fighting for revenues that are rightfully ours, economic vitality, and then the final one is asking for help. And sometimes we just do have to ask for your help. So back in 2012, we asked for your help, and the red lines there are all the streets that are going to have treatments applied slurry seal, crack sealing, total reconstruction, but all the streets in the city that are going to have treatments applied as a result of the half-cent sales tax that the voters approved back in 2012, which is a pretty impressive set of streets in the community. Unfortunately, it's not enough. Our streets overall are deteriorating faster than we're fixing them. So as a result, the council has asked us to go to the voters this year and ask for an additional half-cent sales tax for just 6 years. And so this chart shows the red being the roads that have been or are going to be addressed by the original half-cent, and the blue shows the roads that will be addressed by the original, and then the roads that will be addressed in blue by the additional half-cent. So just about any trip you're going to make in your car or on your bicycle or by foot or scooter, at the end of those additional 6 years, you will have gone on a road that's been addressed by those two sales tax measures, assuming the one in November passes. And I'm not making that assumption, but I'm very hopeful that it passes. So tonight we've given you a lot of information, and we want to provide you the opportunity to ask detailed questions. So for instance, Dick McKinley is here, our Public Works Director. He can talk about the particular roads and what year they'll be worked on. But in addition, all of us who made parts of this presentation can answer your questions as well. So Jim, if you would start the round of questions.